sound now. That says we are recording, and we will make that available later this afternoon or early tomorrow morning. We are joined by Dan Wetzel today from the Department of Transportation. We met with Dan, I believe, in August to talk about what this winter is going to look like, and he agreed to spend some time with us today. So at this point in time, I'll turn it over to Dan.
Yeah, thank you. So as mentioned, PennDOT, we did meet with PMTA earlier this summer and just kind of gave the overview of what we're kind of looking at. Since then, we have met with our other partners agencies. We meet with PEMA, Pennsylvania State Police, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and PennDOT. We all get together to decide on these restrictions. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I got a quick PowerPoint for us to go through to help kind of facilitate where we're at. So can you see my screen okay?
Yep, looks good here.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so the as mentioned, I'm Dan Wetzel. I'm the Section Chief for Emergency Incident Management at PennDOT. Our section, we kind of oversee all emergency management protocols for PennDOT on the highways and things like that. So what we're going to talk about today are the winter weather vehicle restrictions and how they are implemented and where we go with those. So we're going to go over what we start doing even before the event happens and how we start viewing why we're doing restrictions. Into the coordination of our agencies, how we speak to one another, how everyone has that input prior to us putting on restrictions, the communications to the public, how do we let you guys know that we're going to be putting restrictions on, and then the different levels of restrictions as well. So prior to a snowstorm, we have a contracted weather service with AccuWeather. AccuWeather will send us one of these maps, and that's when we start kind of getting, okay, what's going on here? Typically, we can get these maps up to about 48 hours in advance. It depends on where the storm's coming from and how developed it is that they can send them out. We've had them as early as 5 days in advance. If they're definitely sure it's coming up, maybe a nor'easter or something. But the big lake effect ones, those are harder for them to give them to us early. They don't see them as easy on the radars and stuff. So the earlier we get the notification, the quicker we can start looking into things and the plans. Again, it's a contracted service, so we can't share this map to anybody outside of PennDOT. That's part of our contract with them. I am able to utilize it for this demonstration here to show you what we have. So what we do is we end up taking this information, and if we have a map like this that's calling for well over a foot of snow in areas, we have a statewide weather call with our districts. So PennDOT's split up into 11 different districts, with District 1 being in the northwest up in Erie area. District 6 is your Philadelphia region, 8 your Harrisburg region, and 11 is your Pittsburgh area. And if you look at this map, you can see it faintly written, the numbers where the districts are at. So we get all those districts on a weather call. Also on that call would be the Pennsylvania State Police, PEMA, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and other state agencies. New Jersey and New York like to join us as well on our weather calls. We don't get much success of having Ohio or Maryland or any of the other neighboring states joining us. But we do get great success of New Jersey and New York joining us, which mainly those are the areas that are impacted the most when we do look at restrictions from that. So we have that call, and we AccuWeather joins our call, and they give us the up to the day information. Typically this meeting is right around the 24-hour mark prior to the storm, because then they have a good feel of level of competency. So it ranges between 24 and maybe 16 hours prior to the event that we look at, because we want to try to get the most accurate weather forecast prior to making any decisions. Once the decisions are made with the restrictions, it's a coordination amongst the agencies. So again, Turnpike, Pennsylvania State Police, Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, and PennDOT, we all sit together and talk about, okay, this is where we're seeing the storm going. This is the level of intensity we're going to be seeing in this time frame. Do we need to do restrictions? Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes that answer is yes. Then we got to decide what level of restriction are we looking at. Do we need to look at just banning empty tractor trailers? Do we need to look at doing a full ban of all tractor trailers, whether you have chains or not? So that's something we discuss with all the agencies involved. Also, we look and see what are other states inkling at doing. Is New Jersey going to go with the empties, or are they going to go with the full ban? Different things like that, because we want to try to mirror what they have to an extent. So say Jersey was going to get hit really hard, their whole state, and we were only going to get the eastern part of our state hit hard. We may look at doing a full restriction to support New Jersey towards the very eastern part of the state. But then as you move a little farther inland, we may up our restriction, downgrade our restriction to maybe just an empties to try to keep folks moving the best we can. And then we look at the corridor approach as well. We try to keep it as an interstate to interstate area. So that's why you'll see, I'm going to use Interstate 80 as an example. We've looked different ways of, there's that long section, about 100 miles between I-79 and I-99. Excuse me, it's more than 100 miles. It's pushing 140 miles between I-79 and I-99. How can we change the restrictions in there to try to make it so, okay, Clearfield County is getting hit hard with the snow. We want to do restrictions in here, but where do we draw that line to get so we can try to keep you folks moving the best we can. And the only time we look at these restrictions as well, and the only roads these restrictions go on are interstate roads, and we have an exception out in our District 5 near the Allentown area of US 22 and PA 33. So we do look at those routes as well, but mainly it's just interstates that we're looking at. So once the restriction is planned and where we're going to be putting it in, we decide the level of our activation. If there's restrictions going on the roadway, we are activating our command centers. We're going to be there in person until the event's over. We'll be there from the start to the very end. And then one thing that folks don't realize, a lot of times I've heard of that, hey, you guys just set them on there and you forget them. And that's not truly the case. When we set the restrictions, we have it set up on a timer that every 2 hours we're meeting, all 4 agencies are meeting to discuss, can we lift the restrictions? And that's even from the very beginning. We try to plan to take them off as soon as we put them on. That way, when it's time to start taking them down, we can start taking them down. Working with PMTA and the different trucking agencies, we've heard the concerns of these restrictions. I know a few of you probably remember that a few years ago, we would set it that, hey, 8 a.m. we're putting the restrictions on, and there we go at 8 a.m. that they were on and the sun was still shining. And that's disheartening. It really was. For 4 or 5 hours, you guys could have still ran for a little bit. So working with you guys and hearing your input, we were able to decide, hey, we're going to shoot for 8 a.m., but if the weather's not impacting it yet, we're going to bump it till 10 a.m. We might bump it till noon. When the weather starts and we see that, that's when we're going to start putting the restrictions on now. But we try to give you that game plan. Hey, we're looking at 8 a.m., but we ask that you guys also understand that the weather can come in earlier, it can come in later. So 8 a.m. is the goal. It started snowing real hard at 6 a.m. They're going on 2 hours earlier. It didn't start snowing till noon. They're going on 4 hours later. So we do try to work the best we can with the weather on only implementing these when conditions warrant now. once they're implemented, like I said, we meet every 2 hours to make sure that are they still relevant. And we're watching the radar, we're watching the road conditions. We have weather stations throughout the Commonwealth. I think we have about 80 of them that we know the grip level of the road, we know the conditions of the road. Plus we have every 2 hours as well, our counties must report their road conditions through our automated system. So we know what conditions they're seeing out on the roadways. And then PSP also reports back what they're seeing on the roadways from their troopers. So as we see the storm progressing out, we start rolling the restrictions back off. So if the storm is moving west to east, let's use Interstate 80 again as an example, that we restricted all of Interstate 80. Okay, the storm's moving west to east, we may move the restrictions from the Ohio, we may lift the restrictions from the Ohio line to I-99 because, okay, that section's safe to clear to travel, but the eastern end of the state's still getting hit. So we got to keep that end on for a little while. And then we'll move farther east as that storm continues moving out. So that's kind of what we look at as coordinating with all the agencies. Now, how do we communicate with you folks? As soon as we have the inkling that we're going to be putting on restrictions, we'll either text or email PMTA executives and give them the heads up of, hey, we're not sure what we're doing for sure yet, but there's a good chance of restrictions coming with this upcoming storm. And then as we get closer, we do send the email out to them or text to them and say, hey, this is the restrictions. This is when we're planning to implement them, and let them know that way. There's also an email group chain through PEMA. It's called the Private Sector Group. And in that group, there's multiple trucking industries that are part of this email notification. And an email gets sent out from them as well to that whole group that lets them know. So if you're interested in being in this email chain from the Private Sector Group, there's a form you have to fill out, like what company you're with and stuff like that. And then they approve it to add you onto their contacts to be part of this group. But it's a good way to get information of what's going on in the Commonwealth from the state agencies. We also utilize our variable message boards that you guys see driving down the road all the time. As soon as we know that we're going to be putting them on, what level restriction, we put those on. We try to give advance notice of at least 12 hours in advance that these bans are coming on, and they'll have a time on what time and day that the restriction would be going on and what level. It would say either tier 1 restrictions, or it might say empty and double ban. It might say change required. It depends on what message boards we have, because all of our message boards are different. Some are large and we can fit a lot of information on them. Some are smaller and we are restricted on how much information we could put on that. So we do definitely try to give at least a 12-hour warning that, hey, there's going to be a ban in this area. And then, of course, our 501pa.com site. That is what we would highly recommend you utilizing if you're seeing weather coming in and you're wondering, what is PennDOT doing? What is the state? What are the state agencies doing? On this site, it will show you where the bans are going to be at. It will show you what bans are live. It will show you the speed limit restrictions, everything like that. Plus, it will give you the road conditions that we're seeing. We do keep that updated during a winter storm very, very quickly. So when we pull the bans off and we say, hey, we're pulling the bans off at 8 p.m., that 501 typically will reflect it right around 8 p.m., maybe even 7:55. We try to get that on there as soon as possible. But like anything technical, a computer can lag some. So we work on putting them in, and our 501 system sometimes takes 10 minutes to recognize that, hey, they've got removed. So, but that is the best site for that. Also on the 501 site, it's going to be on there. I don't know if it's on there yet, but it's going to be for commercial trucks and commercial vehicles. You'll be able to click that link. It will show you the restrictions. It'll show you what tiers what's allowed in what tier, and different items like that as well. So it'll give you the information that you need to know if you can go out on the roads and stuff like that. So again, that's 511pa.com to get all that information. So this is what our levels of restrictions look like. We just updated this infographic just a couple weeks ago when we met with the 4 agencies. We were asked, PMTA did ask us to say, hey, can we get something a little more defiant? Like, hey, can we actually see better what's in there? So this is what was decided amongst the 4 agencies. We got some good feedback from a couple of trucking companies that like this look and made it pretty simple to see. So you can see the columns of tier 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 broke out. And they're color coordinated as well. So the colors that you see on the maps are going to be reflecting what these numbers are. That way, if you ever see a red line on the map in the restrictions area, that means a complete commercial vehicle ban is in place. If you see an orange line in the map, you know that it's the empties and doubles at that point and stuff. But loaded could continue running with chains on board. The loaded doubles can run with chains on board. So it just gives you a couple of things that you can utilize as a infographic. And that's going to be available on the website. You'll be able to print them off. You'll be able to share them. It is going to be public knowledge for sure. And of course, our speed limit restrictions. So speed limit restrictions, you'll see us utilizing more than we do the vehicle bans. And what we've seen with the speed limit restrictions was it's pretty much a way on the sign to put on there, hey, slow down, we really mean it, is what it's kind of doing. We could put slow down, use caution, stuff like that, and we don't seem to get a change in traffic behavior. But when we change the speed limit to 45 miles per hour, we seem to get a more reaction from the motoring public, of them slowing down. We're not sure what clicks in their head with it, but it does seem to work. And we're getting buy-in from our snowplow operators are some of the ones that are asking for these to be put on. So they go up through their management to ask for these 45-mile-an-hour speed limit restrictions to get on. So the folks in the field plowing the snow are seeing a difference when these are put on, and they're wanting them on when snow and ice conditions are bad. Now with that, with our speed limit restrictions, we do have a trucks right lane only. So we want the commercial vehicles to stay in the right lane. We piloted this for a couple years in our District 10 area. So we wanted to get on I-80 and stuff like that. And we piloted in our District 5 area around the Allentown area. Because we had some concerns ourselves about if you guys are stuck in the right lane and another vehicle comes up the ramp, are we going to have an issue here? So like I said, we piloted that for about 2 years and we didn't find any issues in those piloted areas. So that ended up getting implemented statewide last year, and we're going to continue that this year, that when 45-mile-an-hour speed limit restrictions are on, we ask that the commercial vehicles stay in the right lane only. Obviously, and working with the state police, if there's an issue in the right lane, you got emergency vehicles on the shoulder, stuff like that. Common sense tells you move over to the left lane, get by them, come back over to the right lane. Majority of the time, the commercial vehicles, you guys do an awesome job of staying in the right lane only anyways, unless you had to pass. But obviously we're looking at the safety aspect of things. If the speed limit restrictions are on, we're having some icing conditions pretty bad and some stowing conditions that our plow trucks are trying to keep up. They're just not able to keep up with the rates that are coming down. So we're just trying to get everyone slowed up some. Again, this just kind of goes over that 45s. Where the 45-mile-an-hour speed limit restriction is implemented from is from our PennDOT area command, which is located in Harrisburg. The request comes in from the district that for an area to have speed limit restrictions, and then we approve them. And then again, we do try to lift them as soon as conditions warrant. And that's the same way with the bans. We are having We have discussions with our districts. We just went through with all of them the past 2 months, going through items like the restrictions and the bans and stuff like that, and emphasizing to them that, hey, you don't need to have perfect road conditions to lift these bans and start requesting to lift the 45 speed limit restrictions and stuff like that. What we're trying to get to them is, once you're seeing the snow moving out of the radar and the heavy conditions are kind of done, we can start looking at lifting these. And it's some of them have a little bit of a fear of, okay, if I lift these too soon and we get out there and we get a major crash, are we going to get in trouble for it? And that's not what we're kind of looking for. We have confidence that once the storm's moving out and we see better conditions, that we're not going to get the heavy snow rates and stuff like that. We feel confident that your drivers would be able to safely maneuver on those roadways without causing major issues. And also our plow trucks would be able to keep up at that point as well. So these are the tiered restrictions we're going to go through. So the tier 1, it's pretty much the empties. All the empty tractor trailers are restricted at that point. It shows you what vehicles are restricted in here, except for, so the buses are allowed to run as long as they have a alternative traction control device equipped. So the chains on board, or something, the auto chain, something like that, that is on board, ready to go if they need to utilize it. The tier 2, it bumps the loaded doubles off of the roadway, except if they have chains on board. But also in tier 2, it does remove the bus completely, whether they have ATD equipped or not. They're getting pushed. So the chains, if the loaded doubles have chains on board, they can still run in tier 2. They don't get removed until tier 3 here. In tier 3, that ban is for all loaded commercial vehicles, except if you have chains on board. And what we're saying with chains on board is, we don't need you to have them on your tires. We just you need to have them in your compartment. You need to have them hanging on the trailer, on the back of the truck. You just need to have them available to put on. And the reasoning is, what we found was, when a wreck happens, and it could be a regular passenger vehicle wreck, and you folks become stopped and it's snowing inch-per-hour snow rates or 2 inch-per-hour snow rates, we found issues where some tractor trailers just couldn't get going up a hill. They were stuck. They were stuck behind the wreck, and then the wreck cleared, and then they just couldn't get going up over the hill. So working with private industry again, I want to say it was FedEx that helped us come up with this idea. And so we implemented it. It was either FedEx or the milk haulers helped us out and saying, hey, kind of give us some leeway here. Give us something that we could maybe utilize. So it was decided to do the chains on board, that if you were stuck there, we can put chains on, get up over the hill under your own power. And then once it's safe for you to pull off to the side of the road or at the next exit, you can pull off and remove your chains and then continue down the road. So that was just a caveat that we put on there to try to give you folks leeway on continuing to move. What we've been doing lately is we're trying to keep it to that empties or up to this tier 3 area. We're trying it, but there are caveats where tier 4 can come into play, where that restricts all commercial vehicles, no matter what, whether you have chains on board or not. We're taking all commercial vehicles off the roadway at that point. And it's just, we've seen success running tier 3s and tier 1s and 2s. So not last year, we didn't run tier 4 that often. There was a couple times we did, but not nearly as often. And then the tier 5, it removes all vehicles from the roadway except for emergency responders at that point. So hopefully we never get to tier 5. That's never, we don't like putting these restrictions on and bans on, but when weather dictates it, we do have to do that to try to keep the roadways open. And oftentimes, because we do get asked, well, the bans, you're restricting us from moving, stuff like that. And what we've seen, we have data to back it up, is that when we have the bans on, the longest interstate closures we have are about 3 to 4 hours, if that. There's been some snowstorms when we have bans on, we haven't closed an interstate for more than an hour, maybe 2 hours, with little wrecks here and there. We don't get long-term closures. When we haven't had these bans on and a major wreck happens, we're seeing closures on interstate systems of 18 plus hours. The longest bans we put on, we try, like I said, we try to put them on when they're warranted, and we try to lift them as soon as they're warranted. So you're looking at maybe bans of 10, 12 hours. Sometimes they could get longer, of course, but it depends on what the weather is doing to dictate that. But we have the data, like I said, that shows that with the bans on, the interstates actually open longer than what we did without the bans. So when we didn't have the bans and we were closing interstates for 18 plus hours, we haven't had bans last for 18 plus hours. So, and then you're not stuck out there on the roadway.
Dan, are you with us? I think we might have lost some audio.
People have heart attacks and die. We've had diabetic. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. The internet must be flashing something here. Let me try to get this back to that final slide. So again, that's our website to go to. If you have questions, I'm going to be here to answer some questions for you today. Again, we try not to leave these restrictions on, and bans for long periods of time. As soon as they're warranted to lift them, we lift them. We try to do it strategically to try to keep you folks moving as well. Our goal is not to shut you down and not let you move across the state. We want to keep you guys moving, but we want to keep everyone on our highways safe at the same time. And again, no one has ever went and pointed fingers and said, oh, it's a tractor trailer that causes the wrecks and stuff like that. Well, we know sometimes it's that passenger car that cut you off that causes the wrecks and stuff like that. So by no means is this a finger pointing thing or anything like that. It's just, this is the kind of direction we're going, and we want to share the information with you. The more fluid we are and transparent we are with this information with you guys, the better we can get you folks to understand it, and the commercial industry to understand it. And that's why we're pushing to do these webinars and sending the information out and sharing the infographics the best we can. That way, if you have the information and the data, then I think we're going to be better suited. So with that, I'll kick it back over to you guys, and I'm available for any questions if you have any.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Dan, for walking us through that. We appreciate your time this afternoon. We did get a few questions in the chat box and in the Q&A box. I'm going to read those out and let you take those on. But for those of you that are with us, if you have questions, you can type them into the chat box or in the question and answer box. If you'd like to speak, to ask your question, you can click the raise hand button, and we'll facilitate that as best we can. First, a couple of the questions that came through, they want to know how they can get on that email chain. Could you explain how they could get access to that?
Yeah, so if we can get a list of everyone that wants to be on that email chain, if you can email it to me directly with the list, I will get with PEMA. PEMA is the one who manages that private sector group, and we'll be able to get them on the list. Pretty much all they need is the name, the company, phone number, and email, because the majority of the communications is via email. So what they'll do is I'll submit that to PEMA, and PEMA, the private sector group, will send everyone on that email it's kind of like an application. It's just a form you have to fill out. and submit back, but it'll all be via email.
Perfect. I can help facilitate that. Anyone, you can email me and I can compile a list to give to Dan. So I just put my email address in the chat box. You email me and we'll get you squared away as best we can. All right, let's see what's next here. Oh, and can we get access to that graphic that you showed with the vehicles and the check marks? Could you share that with us, Dan?
Yeah, I'll be able to send that to you.
Perfect. Okay, where would a straight truck that is not a box truck fit on that chart?
A straight truck will be classified under the, it would go into the same category as the box truck. The infographic is the way they made it. Let me see if I can actually pull can you see my infographic now?
Yeah, it's kind of small though.
Let me share a different screen here. How's that?
Yeah, that's better.
So the straight trucks are going to come in at the same as the box trucks. There's been discussion. It hasn't moved yet, so it will not move this year. It's going to stay the same this year for sure. But there was talks about triaxles, tandem dump trucks, stuff like that, and even straight trucks that are loaded, of adding them in here somehow to make it so we can see them and keep them moving as well. Because if you're a loaded triaxle or a loaded straight truck, stuff like that, there should be caveats that you would be able to keep moving. So we have looked at, we're looking at it. It's just not going to be implemented this year yet.
Okay, thank you for that. Under tier 3, how many chains must be carried on the vehicle to be in compliance?
So let me pull that document up. I don't want to give you false information, so I want to make sure I give you the proper stuff here. I want to say it's on the drive axle. I think you have to have one on each side of the drive axle is what I believe the wording is. But I will definitely get that. It's in the framework. I don't know if I have it readily. Yeah, here it is. Let me look that up real quick for you, and I will get back to you here in just a second. I just got the document open now.
That's great. I'm getting some emails from you guys that want to be added to the list. Thank you for that. I will be following up with Dan this afternoon, so I'll provide him that list. I'm getting several emails, so thank you for your participation. I appreciate that.
I lost you. Can you hear me again?
Are you there, Dan?
Yep. Can you guys hear me again?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, my internet for some reason is not liking me today, but I did pull it up. It's in Appendix E of the travel restriction framework, and that's getting finalized again. We had a small edit in it. It's nothing major. It doesn't really impact anyone. It was just a wording issue with like the speed limit restriction was all it was. So it's going to be very mirrored to what was out last year. Once we get that finalized, we're going to get it shipped out to you guys. But in Appendix E of that document, it's saying that the chains don't need to be applied. When applied, chains must be applied to tires on the opposite ends of the same drive axle. So we're just looking at your drive axle, one of your drive axles, and on each end of it. So if you're just going to do the front drive axle of your tractor, you would just put them on the outside of each tool. Is what you'd be looking at.
All right, thank you. Okay, I've got some more questions here in the question and answer box. When PennDOT closes an interstate, what criteria does PennDOT use to determine whether truck drivers could find a safe place to park and drivers would have access to food, water, and restroom facilities?
So what we do, we try to look at an interstate corridor approach. And that way we can, when we close when we ban that roadway, we try to give a caveat for truckers to go north or south to different, let's say we're talking I-80 again. If we put the ban up at the 79 interchange, we're given caveats that they can go south and get on the turnpike or down to even I-70 and maybe cut across the state that way. Not too often are we seeing that we're putting bans on that truly close all of our interstates. Typically they're either on the northern part or the southern part. There are times it happens for sure. But what we try to do is we give the advance warning of that 12-hour advance warning, saying, hey, at 8 a.m. we're putting the bans on. And we're kind of asking the commercial vehicles to help us out on, if you know we're going to be putting the bans on, is to find refuge prior to where that ban's at. Because sometimes where these bans are at, again, the I-80, I-79 area, there's not a truck stop right there. We've actually talked to PSP and opened it up to the exit 29 out there because there's truck stops at that location that the trucks can get off and have food, fuel, stuff like that. So we do try to look at that. It's not the perfect setup for it, but that's where we do ask the private industry to help us out, that if we're given an advance warning of these bans are going to be on 12 hours from now, to start looking for places along the way to stop.
Sure. So will there be an exemption issued for carriers hauling road salt or anti-skid?
Yeah, so in that document, let me scroll back up here. I'm not going to share my screen because I think that might be what's happening with my internet. In that document, in the ban framework, starting on page 10, are commercial vehicles exemptions. So salt and anti-skid folks are exempt in it. It's like almost the bottom to the last bullet. It says salt delivery vehicles making deliveries to public works agencies are exempt, and it continues on down in the wording that it does cover anti-skid as well, that they're exempt to continue running. As long as they're delivering for that municipality and stuff like that. They can't just be delivering to a excavating company, stuff like that. It has to be a public works facility.
Excuse me. The next question comes in. It says, how is commercial motor vehicle defined when the restrictions are activated? Is that anything over 26,000 pounds, or where does the line get drawn?
So the line that we drew was a commercial vehicle is defined on if you need to have a commercial driver's license to operate the vehicle, is what we defined it as.
All right. The next question says, we have a national supply chain crisis, and shutting down interstates will just add to this crisis. Will PennDOT take this current crisis into account before shutting down interstates?
Yeah, so we actually just had a discussion this morning with multiple states along the East Coast here. And that was one of the questions, was the national supply chain crisis that's out there. So yeah, we will be looking into that for sure as we have to look at these bans. And it could play into a factor on it. But again, many times when we put these bans on, the bans are shorter than what happens if we don't put the bans on and we have a large scale closure. Like I said, the large scale closures will last 18 plus hours at times. But yes, that is something that we are keeping an eye on and keeping an eye on that demand as we move forward here.
Sure. Going back to the question about road salt anti-skid exemptions, where could someone find that list of the exemptions so that they could carry that with them?
So it's in the the ban and travel framework that will be on the 511 site. Like I said, it's not finalized yet. Like I said, we were waiting on a couple words to get wordsmith, but that's it. If you have the framework from last year, it's pretty much identical. It's literally like 4 words we had to change in it. But that's going to be on page 10 and 11 of the travel and ban framework that has the list of exemptions.
Okay, we'll keep an eye out for that. Thank you very much. So for a local trucker, let alone someone from out of state, is there any thought to posting signage or strobes near exits showing the way to the nearest parking area? You have to assume that any or all rest stops are going to be jammed up. Any thought on that?
Yeah, so the only signs we have right now are the blue signs that you see going down the highways of truck stops ahead, and things like that. That's the only signs we have at this point. There hasn't really been talk on adding signage to point you towards a parking area, and we agree. Our rest areas, they were built back in the 60s and 70s. There was a lot less traffic then and than there is now. So we understand that frustration as well. And we are looking at different parking ideas and implements. We've actually been working, talking with different warehouses on letting truckers stay at the warehouses to park, because a lot of warehouses, you guys know better than I do, is that once you can only be there to drop your trailer, hook a trailer, and you got to get it off their property. So we've been talking to some warehouses trying to, like, hey, if we're putting these restrictions on, will you help us out and let truckers stay at your warehouses and park there and stuff? So it's going to be a long road yet for that, but that's pretty much the signage that we have, are those blue informational signs along the interstates that are currently up now.
Sure. We've got a couple of questions here about drivers returning empty, and I want to add my own question as kind of a part 1 to that. How do you define empty? And is let's say an empty truck that's still at a third of its GVWR, is that does that pass the ban? How does that definition fall?
Yeah, so I want to get you the exact wording that we have in the framework here. I don't want to give you something. I mean, I know it off the top of my head, but I want to give you the exact wording. And you're correct with the third vehicle weight rating. Let me see if I can.
And while he's looking that up, thank you everyone for your questions. We are going to try to keep this within an hour. So if you have any questions, please ask them now. But we are going to try to keep it under an hour today. We do appreciate Dan's time and his responses to our questions.
So for some reason, I must be overlooking it or something in here, but it is a third of the gross vehicle weight rating. So what we're asking is that you can keep a third of that vehicle weight rating in the trailer, and preferably over your drive axles, up towards the front of the trailer at that point, is what we're asking. I know that it's not the most economical because you're not getting rid of the full load, but that's what we're asking. If you need to keep moving, that you do that. And we have had sheets, I want to say it was sheets that started doing that. They left a pallet full of items up in the front and filled the front of their trailer up, and they just kept that in there. They gave it that third of the third of the weight. So they'd be legally ready to go. And PSP does check. They've actually opened up trailers before, and the person had a pallet jack in there with a pallet and said, well, I'm loaded. There's something in there. That didn't cut it. It needs to be a third of the vehicle weight to be out there.
Okay. And so part two of that question is, let's say someone is out somewhere, loaded, they make a delivery, now they're going back unloaded. Is there any thought to an exemption for those drivers that are on their way home?
No, not at this point. There is not an exemption for that. They would have to take secondary roads. They would be banned from the interstate at that point if they were empty. And we get that question as well is, well, you're putting us on roads that are worse than what the interstate is. But what we see is when a wreck happens or people get stopped up on these side roads, they're able to actually just turn around and go the other way if they needed to. They're not stuck in long lines of traffic that can't get out there. So yeah, if you are headed someplace loaded and we have an empties ban on, and you get rid of all of your cargo, at that point you wouldn't be allowed to return on the interstate till the ban is lifted.
Okay. The next question says, why won't Ohio or Maryland interact with PennDOT regarding interstate restrictions?
Well, we're not really sure why they don't interact too much with us. I mean, they'll support us with some message boards and stuff, but we've reached out to them, or we've reached out to their executive staff and things like that, and we just don't get feedback from them too much. Where New Jersey and New York, they are fully vetted into with us. Oftentimes we know what restrictions they're looking at before they implement them. They know what we're looking at before we implement them. And we just work very well with New York and New Jersey, but the other neighboring states just haven't really opened those lines of communications up with us. And we have tried. We sent emails, we made phone calls, multiple different things, and just haven't had the greatest success there.
All right. Has there been an economic impact study conducted to determine the effect of these restrictions on stakeholders in the state's economy?
I don't know if there's been that type of study completed. I can look into that. I just know the only studies and data analysis that was completed was the road closure timeframes and the accident. Pennsylvania State Police pulled data showing a major decrease in traffic accidents when the bans are in place. So that's pretty much the only data that has been pulled was traffic accidents and closure timeframes.
Okay. Is PennDOT anticipating more road closures this year due to a plow truck driver shortage?
We don't believe so. I think you're going to see it just as normal as we have in past years. It's going to be dictated by the severity of the weather. Our plow truck shortage, our interstates are our primary goal. So those are going to be covered immediately whenever trucks go out to plow snow. And also we're extending shift coverage. So if there is a shortage, we'll extend operators' time. We'll approve overtime for them to plow the snow longer and things like that, and extend routes. So you could see an impact on some of the back roads, things like that, hey, typically this road got plowed every 4 hours. Okay, now it's not getting plowed maybe every 6 hours, 8 hours because of that. But your interstate should still have top of the line priority coverage.
Okay, we got one more question just came in. Someone wanted you to clarify what a commercial vehicle is for these weather events. And you said anything that requires a CDL, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's what we're looking at is when we say commercial vehicle, we're looking at anything that requires you to have a commercial driver's license.
Okay. So here's a question here. If an empty 33,000 pound GVW truck actually weighs 14,000 pounds when it's empty. That equates to 42% of its GVW. This is a lot of math here. But would that vehicle be banned then, even though it's 42% of its GVW when it's empty?
Yeah, so what we're looking at, this was a question that was actually asked maybe last year or 2 years ago. And the way PSP is handling this and wants it to be handled is that we're looking at a third of what you could haul. So if you were allowed to haul 60,000 pounds, I'm horrible with math too. Let's go 90,000 pounds. It's easier for me. If you were approved to haul 90,000 pounds, you'd have to have 30,000 pounds of material in there. Or if you were approved to haul 30,000 pounds, you have to have 10,000 pounds of cargo in there. So it's what your cargo weight is. It's pretty much what they're looking at. Is that 1/3 of your what you're allowed to haul is what they want you to have in the truck.
Okay, I think that answers this next question as well. I'm going to read it just because I've read all of them in order of fairness here. So if I have loads, parentheses, shipping large cube light freight that require a full 48-foot flatbed, I'm getting hungry for lunch, flatbed, but the whole load is no more than 9,000 to 10,000 pounds, is this shipment restricted outbound based on the GVWR?
Yeah, so if it doesn't meet that threshold of the weight that you're allowed to haul, that 1/3 of that weight, then yeah, it would be restricted. Because like you stated there, every load's going to be different. If you got a load full of feathers, you're not going to be able to get that third weight. But if you're hauling concrete blocks, you're not going to have too many concrete blocks in there to make your 1/3 weight.
Great. All right. That's all the questions that I've seen come in. I don't see anyone with a hand raised or any other open questions in our Q&A box. So I think that's it. I think we've kept you on your toes here for the last 15 minutes or so. Dan, I appreciate you hanging in there and answering these questions for us.
Well, I appreciate the questions. I appreciate the feedback. We got to work together in this. I know it's tough. Definitely, when we put these bans on, it's tough on you folks and so on. But that's why we're having these webinars. We want to answer these questions. We want to get as much information out to you folks as we can. That way you're better prepared for it as well. So thank you for having me here today. And if you have questions afterwards, let PMTA know and we'll answer them the best we can.
All right. Thank you very much for your time today, Dan. We really appreciate that. And thank all of you for joining us today. Great questions, good turnout. We appreciate your time. We hope that this has been helpful and informative to you. Just a couple of quick notes really quick. On Wednesday, PMTA is having its board of directors meeting here in the office. And then November 23rd, our safety management council will be meeting here in the office. So if you're affiliated with the board or the SMC, we look forward to seeing you here in the next couple of weeks. Other than that, thank you everyone, and stay safe.